Hi friends, welcome back to another episode of Generation Tech. My name is Alan. So today we're going to talk about the Chosen One prophecy, who it actually is talking about, and what it means. As Qui-Gon Jinn lay dying in Obi-Wan's arms, he mentions an individual who will once and for all destroy the Sith.
Is the Chosen One. He will bring balance. Train him.
And of course, he's talking about Anakin Skywalker. But where did this prophecy first come from? Well, like in the Star Wars universe, the origins of the Chosen One prophecy is now considered legends. But like a lot of things in legends, it's not necessarily untrue, and a modified version could one day be elevated to canon by Disney. Anyway, this will give us a little bit of context that we'll need to further explore this subject. It was said that in the heart of the Jedi Temple, housed in the Jedi Archives, was the Great Holocron, an endless source of information and data that had been collected through the ages by the Jedi Order. Its depth was so great that even Master Yoda had trouble penetrating its deepest secrets. Inside this holocron were many references to the prophecy, which supposedly said, a Jedi will come to destroy the Sith and bring balance to the Force. The problem is, though, there is no exact records of the origin of this prophecy. It is indicated that this prophecy dates back well before the RUUSAN Reformation, when the Republic and Jedi Order were demilitarized after their victory over the Sith during the New Sith Wars. At the time, many in the Jedi Order thought that the prophecy was no longer necessary. Little did they know, a Sith Lord named Darth Bane and his apprentice had survived the Purge. Now, back to canon, in the novelization for Revenge of the Sith, we hear Padme ask Obi-Wan about the prophecy, and whether Anakin is the Chosen One. He responds by saying, very probably, but I've scanned this prophecy. It says only that a Chosen One will be born and bring balance to the Force. Nowhere does it say he has to be a Jedi. And although I respect the Jedi, I also believe that they are an extreme group on just one end of a very wide spectrum. And because they lack objectivity, they've twisted the prophecy with their own bias, something that Obi-Wan Kenobi has hinted. History is written by the victors. I really love this quote because I believe whenever we consume any kind of information, we have to keep in mind who wrote this information. All we ever hear about this prophecy is from the Jedi point of view. But did you know the Sith also had their own interpretation, one that I think is just as twisted in their own way? The Sith believed in the sith'ari, an individual who will rise up from their ranks. The actual words of the prophecy were considered too sacred to be put into writing by the ones who kept record of it. How convenient. So instead they passed it from generation to generation verbally. And if you guys have ever played a game of telephone, you know it doesn't really work very well. Anyway, around 6,900 years before the Battle of Yavin, the prophecy was recorded. The sith'ari will be free of limits. The sith'ari will lead the Sith and destroy them. The sith'ari will raise the Sith from death and make them stronger than before. Now, in many ways, Darth Bane did fulfill this prophecy by creating the Rule of Two, but in the end, he wasn't completely successful. Darth Plagueis, who in some ways ended the Rule of Two, also was able to take a step back and analyze the situation from a more objective point of view. Prophecies are generally wishful thinking. The fact that the Sith created their own savior myth is predictable, yet these predictions seem uniquely specific to the actions I am taking now. I am not a creature of superstition, but if the robes of the sith'ari fit, I see no reason not to claim them. The similarities in both of these prophecies are striking. They both promise a greater future for their order. My belief is that the Chosen One and the sith'ari prophecies all come from the same source, a source so ancient that it might be as old as the Jedi or Bendu, who first settled on Tython. Legends say that the ancient Jedi were practitioners of both the light and dark side of the Force. They found balance in the Force within themselves. It was said that when the Force became unbalanced, the planet itself would erupt into volcanic explosions, earthquakes, and terrible Force lightning storms. For several generations, the Jedi were able to maintain their balance, but after a conflict known as the Despot Wars happened, things started falling apart. Many Jedi started leaning towards the dark side of the Force, and the Force Wars were started. In the end, the dark side Force users were defeated by the original Jedi Order. But they started seeing the light side as superior to the dark side. These Jedi would turn completely away from the dark side and form the modern Jedi Order. So I think the prophecy comes from this time period, and it wasn't just a prophecy at the time, it was more like a natural law of how the Force should be used. And if the inhabitants of Tython didn't use the Force correctly and find balance, the planet would literally destroy itself. And that's actually what happened at the end of the Force Wars. What used to be a rule for survival was then twisted by followers of the dark and light side to be used in their own way. It doesn't make sense that balance in the Force comes with the destruction of one of the extreme sides in the Force. I think the Force can only find balance if both sides can peacefully coexist with one another. Now, George Lucas himself has said that this is not true. According to Lucas, one of the most important tenets of the Jedi Order is keeping the Force in balance by keeping the Sith or chaos in check. I do respect the fact that a lot of you think that George Lucas's word is law, but I want you guys to try to keep an open mind on this because 1, George Lucas has sold the Star Wars universe to Disney, and 2, good and evil, aka the dark and light side of the Force, really can't be banished. Even if you destroy the Sith, won't another organization like the Knights of Ren replace them? And 3, if both the dark and light side of the Force are natural to the universe, won't there always be a conflict between these two sides? How many more people have to die in this battle between the light side and the dark side? Now, if we look at Anakin Skywalker and his rise, fall, and redemption, it could be said that he fulfilled the Jedi prophecy. But the dark side does eventually come back. In the recent Twin Sons episodes, Obi-Wan and Maul both mentioned that Luke Skywalker is the Chosen One. Kenobi believes Luke is the Chosen One because he's lost hope and considers Anakin dead. Maul, on the other hand, has a unique perspective on both sides of the Force. He manages to combine a Jedi and Sith holocron with Ezra Bridger and realizes that the key to destroying the Sith lies on Tatooine. Anakin had his chance, but he passed up the opportunity when he encountered the third version of the prophecy, which was given to us by the Celestials, or the 3 known as the Ones. The son is the embodiment of the dark side, while the daughter is the living incarnation of the light side. The father balances these two out and prevents them from defeating one another. Anakin Skywalker arrives on the world during the Clone Wars and proves to the father that he has the potential to replace him and become the Chosen One. However, he doesn't follow through and has a vision of himself as Darth Vader, a vision that is wiped from his memory. This canon story foreshadows Anakin's path that he will fall to the dark side, and although he has potential to become the Chosen One, it's not his destiny to become it. Instead, this responsibility falls to Luke Skywalker. Now, we made a prediction that Luke Skywalker in The Last Jedi will become a great Jedi. To summarize, I think he's found an ancient temple, possibly one that was created before the Jedi were split between the dark and the light. It's possible that he is stuck outside the temple because the majority of temples we've seen so far all require at least 2 Force users to open. So Rey is actually the key to Luke entering one of these temples. Luke is the last Jedi not necessarily because he will die, but because his teachings will be different from the teachings of the Jedi. The Force organizations in the galaxy during this new trilogy are very different from the original trilogy and the prequel trilogy. With the destruction of the Sith and Jedi Order, much of the baggage and knowledge that were attached to these two factions were also lost. In its place are the Knights of Ren, which I believe are only a shadow of what once was the Sith Order. And Luke, although he is extremely powerful, has lost all connections to the old Jedi Order. Everything sets the stage for a new order to rise, and if true balance is to be found, that order needs to be gray. Because let's be honest, whether we like it or not, black and white morality is out of fashion now, and everything is about shades of gray. And Disney loves being in fashion and reaching a mainstream audience. But should they do this, they'll also be taking a great risk. Words like Jedi and Sith are beloved by every Star Wars fan, and they're terms that drive people to the theaters, merchandising, games, books, and so on. We do know that Disney wants to phase out what they're calling legacy characters. That way all the news stories will feature characters that they made. This could be a really good way for them to make a new order. Anyway guys, I know I introduced a lot of new Star Wars lore today, and we've actually covered a lot of these topics already in previous videos, so we'll link them down in the description below. Just so you guys have some context about what we talked about. I know we went over a lot of stuff today. And guys, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification button so you won't miss our next few episodes. And also so you can join our community. You know, we'd love to have you. And as usual, guys, thanks for joining us today. If you're watching this, you are Generation Tech.